My name is Teresa Quinn, and I'm a social worker with the National Ovarian Cancer Coalition. And in this video, in our communication section of our mental health resource library today, we're going to be talking a little bit about how to set boundaries when you are the one going through a ovarian cancer experience. So there's obviously lots of different contexts that boundaries come in and communicating strategies come in. It can be with your medical team, it can be with loved ones, it can be with your children. But today, this is kind of just some general tips around how to communicate and set those boundaries and what it looks like to do that with some really concrete language. So the first being kind of the first tip or strategy, when you're going into a challenging conversation, maybe you are sharing about your diagnosis for the first time with somebody that you care about. Maybe you are sharing with somebody who knows that you're in treatment about, your treatment taking one turn or another, or medical decision, the treatment decision that you've made. Any conversation that you're kind of nervous about how that person will respond for whatever reason. The tip is just to remember that you're allowed to set boundaries and expectations at the top of the conversation. So you don't have to just go into it and say, here's the news, and allow someone to react, however they're going to react in that moment, right? Obviously, we can't control the behavior of other people, but I want to encourage you to set expectations at the beginning of a conversation to say, hopefully in kind of a one-to-one private setting, to be able to say, hey, I have some news to share. It's challenging news. Right now, I'm going to share a lot of information. I don't need strategies. I just need empathy, right? Or you can flip it and say, hey, I want to talk through something with you. I'm not really ready to emotionally process it. I just need kind of your like logical brain on, so that way we can talk through some strategies together. You can set those expectations at the beginning of the conversation. It also gives the person that you're sharing with some kind of like boundaries and borders of the conversation. So if they don't know what to say, you've already named what you needed at the beginning. So just as a reminder, you're allowed to set those boundaries at the beginning. You're allowed to say, this is what I need from you. We can have a series of other conversations where we get into the emotional side or where we get into the strategic side. Right now, I just need X. That's the first tip. The second is consider what medium feels best for you to share information with maybe larger groups of people. So for example, if you just got an ovarian cancer diagnosis and you are unsure, how do I tell my coworkers, how do I tell my friends, my acquaintances, my community, people around me, without having to have every single individual conversation with people, because that sounds really exhausting. Remember that it's 2025, right? There's lots of different mediums for communicating. That could be through a mass email, that can be through social media, that can be through almost like a phone chain, right? Some conversations with some trusted people, and you asking them, hey, can you call all of the people in our book club and tell them, right? Can you call everybody in our spiritual community that would have a question and be that point person? Similar to that, remember, you can kind of almost like elect a communication point person as well. So you do not have to be the one answering all the emails, answering all the texts, right? You can say, hey, if you have any questions around how I'm doing or what's going on, if I have, something coming up, feel free to reach out to Sally Sue. Here's her number. She's happy to give you an update. Right? It's another great example of giving somebody who loves you in your life a task to be able to do that feels meaningful and also take some of the pressure off of you to respond very quickly and efficiently to everybody that's reaching out. So again, consider what medium feels best for you: text, email, social media, whatever that is, phone calls, and then consider kind of electing a communication point person. You can do one for each of those mediums too. It doesn't have to be all one person for everything. When it comes to boundary setting with people within those conversations, remember that you are allowed to keep some things private. Not everybody has a full right to your story, especially if they aren't a trusted person in your life. If it's an acquaintance, if somebody that's in your community, say, and they say, hey, I hear that you're going through this, and they want to know all the nitty-gritty details, just remember, no is a full sentence. And you're allowed to respond in ways that feel authentic to you without giving away all the information that doesn't feel authentic to share. So keep in mind, you're allowed to say things like, thank you so much for the support. I really appreciate it. I'm going to keep that information private for right now, or I'm not really able to get into it right now, but I appreciate that you're thinking about me. For folks that maybe are a little bit more invasive and you want to set a little bit more of a hard boundary with them, you can put it back on them, right? To be able to say, it's really interesting that you think that that's an appropriate question to ask somebody going through this, right? If you want to kind of get a little snarky with it, you're allowed to say, I'll get back to you when I have more energy to talk about that, knowing that you don't ever have to get the energy to talk about that, right? One of my favorites was, somebody in my life was going through something hard. And I said, how do you kind of set boundaries with people? And they say, oh, I just pretend like a politician. And I just go, oh, thank you so much. I'm not taking questions right now. And I walk away, which I thought was a brilliant strategy to kind of add in a little bit of their personality to it as well. But find language that works for you and know that it's okay to have a blanket answer to questions that you're not ready, if ever, to respond to. The last piece I'll say around boundaries as well is keep in mind that boundaries have consequences. So we don't just set boundaries, and then if somebody pushes past them, we're like, oh, well, I set the boundary and they pushed past it, so I'm just going to keep going on the same way, right? There's a reason for boundaries, and it's because they have consequences, and that's why they work. That's why they stick. That's how relationship dynamics change over time, is when we actually set in consequences to those boundaries. So if you set a boundary and somebody continues to push past it, it's okay to say, hey, remember I said I don't want X, Y, or Z, and then you did that anyway. And so right now, I'm actually going to need some space and time from the relationship in order to kind of process that, right? I actually am not ready to step back into the relationship right now. Or, hey, I asked you, not to call me because it's exhausting for me to talk on the phone. So I'm going to keep sending it to voicemail until, you stop calling me, right? But once you shoot me a text, I'm happy to respond, right? You do not have to simply accept if people respect your boundaries or not. You're allowed to put in some consequences to those boundaries. Not to say you have to cut off relationships, not to say you have to like completely disregard people, but it's to say, a break in a boundary is a break in trust. And it's okay if it takes some time and space and some rebuilding in order to regain that trust. So I hope that these were helpful, tiny little strategies in order to set boundaries and communicate effectively as you're going through treatment. Hopefully there's a lot more information in this communication section that can help you as you navigate the next steps within that. And keep in mind that all of these resources are available for you in order to support you in this experience.